Hi, friends, and welcome to this last class for Basics 2021, where the rubber hits the road. That's the subtitle. The real title is why I am Episcopalian. Right? And in this last one, I want us to talk about why it's important to figure out how to talk about being an Episcopalian. We know that in general it's important to be able to do this, but one of the things that is difficult for us sometimes is being able to speak to why we do what we do. And it is one of the hardest things in the Episcopal Church because we don't talk like this most of the time. So it's kind of like these are muscles we don't use. And because we don't use them, we don't know how to use them. So what I'm inviting us into doing is just exercising those muscles, right? Getting used to using them right now. Okay. So as usual, I have these 3 questions, and they're just for you to think about and to work through to help you prepare to be able to talk about your faith a little bit. Okay. It's pretty easy, and then we're going to spend the rest of the time talking a little bit about some of the ways that we can talk about it. So this first question, when did you feel something important? It's a pretty vague question, right? It's not very specific. Well, the reason I put it this way is I want it to be vague because sometimes those feelings we get are just that weird thing. It's just a weird feeling, right? So what was that feeling? When did you feel it, right? When did you feel like this was the thing? This was the place, this was the moment. Like, what is this about? So there's for many of us, it's a specific time, place, and with specific people. And try to recall that. What was it like? And maybe you don't have one moment. Maybe you can speak to a couple of different moments. But nailing down the details of that moment can give you some real insight and real opportunity to explore. So take that and work in that space so you can just mine some of that material. Question number 2. What do you look for in a community? Okay. Since you've just talked a little bit about what got you in the heart, now jump into the brain. Go to the heart first and then the brain. So like what got you, and then talk about like what you're looking for. That can also dive into like what keeps you in a church, like what drew you to this church and what keeps you in this church, right? So what do you look for in general? Like what is valuable to you? All right, because you are investing time, money, and emotional commitment to other people. So what are they like, and what do you want to be like? Right? Part of the reason we gather with other people is because we want to be like something. Right? Question 3. How is this church unique? Now, there's lots of things that churches have in common, right? But what is special about this church? So in character, construction, values, tradition, vision, right? Be specific. How is this church unique? Now, here are a few additional thoughts to bring with you into this conversation, right? Now, one of the things that happens when somebody is asking you about the Episcopal Church, like why you're in the Episcopal Church, they're asking you because they want to know. And so it's not just the stuff going on inside your head, right? Know who you are talking to. What do they value? If you know them and what they care about, you'll be able to sort of figure out what part of your story is something that you want to be able to share with them. Another thing is that most people can hype their church. Right? They like their church and right? And you know that about them. You're like, oh, of course they're just telling you about that church. There's a reason you go to yours. There's a reason your church is different than the other churches. You no doubt pass a church to get to that church. So why did you pass those other churches to get to this one? Third, prepare words that you can use when you need them. This is really, really valuable stuff. It's really important. When you're stammering around and not knowing what to say, having words already, there's nothing better than that because they just sort of leap out of your mouth and take away a lot of what scares you. And lastly, and this is kind of a funny concept, I think, but to remember that bonobo apes share 99% of the same DNA with human beings. We are 99% the same as bonobo apes. Most churches, in the same way, most churches are pretty much the same. The key is really digging into that 1%, because that 1% is carrying a lot of weight, right? So, what I'd like for us to do is to take just a few minutes to examine what it means to make an elevator pitch, right? Which is the business way of describing the sort of short answer you can give to somebody who says, "Oh, well, tell me about your church." Having something that you could say that takes you 30 seconds or less is really valuable. Here's a story of why this is important. I had this one time, I was the rector of another church at the time, and I was visiting a parishioner who was in a nursing home, and he was in Alzheimer's wing, and his wife would visit him every single day, and so I would come occasionally to visit the two of them there. And I would come to them during lunchtime, and he would always be at a table at lunch, and he shared that table with one or two other people from the home. And one day there was a person there who saw my collar and asked me about the church, and said she wasn't familiar with the Episcopal Church. Tell me about it. And I stammered, and I had the word. I mean, the clock was ticking. And I couldn't come up with anything really good. And 90 seconds go by, and I'm blabbering about Henry VIII, and I just really lame stuff. And I could tell I really missed a chance to share with her what is unique about my church and why it matters to me. And it's funny because I then drove back to the church, and I was feeling down about it, but I was in the middle. It's funny because I had this, and I was in the middle of a project in which I was trying to talk about being able to talk about your church. I just think that is just the great irony of it. I was in the middle of that project, and I was oblivious to being prepared myself. So I've come up with a few just sort of short things about the church. And you can just crib from these, you can come up with your own. But part of the deal, and part of the reason I wanted to start with what matters to you, is that being able to have the stuff that matters to you start the conversation gives you a way into what matters, right? So you can name the things that matter to you. Because I'm kind of a theological nerd, most of my elevator pitches end up talking about theology. So you can see it, you can catch why. So here you go, first one. A church of tradition and innovation, built upon our Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, and Celtic roots, to be a church for all people, professing many different beliefs around a common practice and life. Says a lot right there. Right? Here's another one. A church rooted in tradition and responsive to our community, which welcomes all people, challenges unjust systems, and unites around a common table. And here's one more. In the Episcopal Church, we don't just gather around a common table. We see our work as reflecting that common table. It is the belief and practice that makes a common table between warring factions possible within the church. Right? So notice that, particularly in that last one, what I'm trying to do in that one is to speak to someone who thinks that you can't deal with stuff within the church, that you have to go outside the church to find grace. Or perhaps people are dealing with a vision of church that is either Protestant or Catholic. You have to be one or the other. Things are always at war with, there's always division. You're always locking horns. and being able to speak to a church that's very, very nature is to transcend that problem. You're speaking, it gives you a chance to speak to what is in their heart. And it helps that this is a huge part of why I'm an Episcopalian. So the key to all of this is to use language that speaks to you and reflects our shared values, right? So it's personal. It's stuff that's personal to you, but it reflects who we are. Right? So, for example, you could try speaking to the Episcopal Church being a common place for left and right, gay or straight, right? It sounds a little like Paul, doesn't it? Right? No longer Jew and Gentile, slave and free, right? You could use this language that highlights the division of our time. It speaks to the via media that is uniquely Anglican and alludes to both traditional and biblical roots, right? So when you can speak into those languages, you can speak to a variety of people to be able to say, yeah, we transcend those divisions, and it's a really divisive time right now, right? And right, we are biblical because we can draw on this pattern from Paul, right? That's speaking in a variety of ways to a variety of people, right? There's another way that you can go into this is to offer a little clarity, not to disparage other traditions, but to offer what is unique to ours. So you can say that while virtually all Christians have communion, Episcopalians see the Eucharist as embodying our common values because we put sharing and eating before believing. Right? The favorite phrase in the Episcopal Church is praying shapes believing, meaning that we get started in the work and we come to believe and know and understand it because we've gotten started in doing it. This is a character trait of ours that is worth highlighting if it's something that you value. Another idea that can speak to people is often something about liturgy. You can talk about our tolerance of both social and theological difference, or our willingness to entertain different parts of tradition. Right? So these are all different ideas that you can grab. Now this is reflected in that favorite phrase people often use. We don't have to check our brains at the door. I'm not a huge fan of that phrase because I find it a little too glib and, strangely, also too vague when specificity could go way much further, so much further, right? We're often trying to say something. When we say we don't want to check our brains at the door, we're trying to say something more like, I'm not only allowed, but encouraged to work through the things that trouble me. We're actually trying to speak to something specific when we're saying that. We're saying we tolerate more than others do, that we want to explore and learn, and so we need to be able to try things out. Right? That's what we're speaking to, not to what we're not, right? But to what we are. This is a version of it that I tend to like. We're not afraid of doubt because it helps us understand what faith really looks like. Right? You have to doubt to believe. Belief doesn't count if you don't have doubt. Like, it's impossible. It's not really belief without doubt. So having clarity, not just around why you are part of the church, but what words express, that stuff is really helpful. Because you know why, but they aren't you. Right? But they do want to hear why you think it is good enough for you to invest yourself in it, right? They want to hear about you, and they want to trust you. Right? So being able to speak to this, like, why are you invested in it? Why are you doing this? But words and concepts make it really easy. So being able to start with stuff in hand, in mind, is so helpful. Here's the last thought on the matter. And this sort of gets into why I'm harping on this idea. You may already know this, but the first half of Martin Luther King's speech at the Washington Mall, often referred to as the I Have a Dream speech, the first half was scripted. The second half was totally unscripted. He went off the script, including that whole part about I have a dream, right? But its most famous parts weren't just random stuff. It wasn't just stuff he was coming up with off the top of his head. They all came from sermons and speeches he had given before. Right? In other words, he grabbed words and phrases he already had in his head to offer people that day. Things that really made sense in the moment. So he would allow, he trusted himself enough to be able to grab a word or phrase as it came by and said, that's what I need right now. This is what I should do. And let's go there. This is a skill and talent we can all develop. And you're more likely to develop it the more you put the words into your head, the words and phrases. So, being able to use them and prepare them. So, go give it another try. Give people a chance to try this out. You might want to invite a friend to come on over or talk on the phone or on Zoom and say, okay, I'm going to give this a shot with you. Will you let me share this idea with you? And see how it goes, right? And just practice. Maybe it's a mirror, maybe it's something, but write things down, put them in a journal, work through them in your head, work through them with your friends, and then keep coming back to it and see what happens. This is one of the most important and rewarding skills to develop, to be able to talk about your church, what you love about your church, what is going, why you're there. You don't have to, it reminds me of that way of talking about things. Sometimes we say, sometimes I don't like my family, but I love them, right? This is the point, is that we love our church. So what is it about it? How do you maintain that love? What's there? And how can we share it with other people? May God's grace be with you, Christ's peace be with you, the Spirit's outpouring be with you, now and always. Take care, my friends.